Okay, so we're going to talk about suspension on these Y62 patrols, and I need to give you some jargon before we get too deep into it. I'm going to be using words like HBMC, hydraulic body motion control. That's the hydraulic suspension found in these Y62s. I'm going to be talking about lower control arm lift, LCA lift, which is talking about this arm. We're lifting it from underneath the shock absorber. Or we're going to talk about a coil lift, and that is depressurizing the system and replacing the coil in the strut. In the beginning, there were lower control arm lifts because no one except Nissan had the hydraulic body motion control machine to be able to do this. That's becoming more popular these days, and there's lots of shops that have got it. But this is how we did it. So see this bracket? This goes all the way around the outside on three sides. It's welded on and it's lifted. So originally this whole bracket would have been maybe that big, and in a lifted application it gets much bigger. 25 mil here equals 50 mil at the wheel, and that's how you work it out and get grease on your hand. There's upsides and downsides to this style of lift. The upside is any mechanic can do it. It's not difficult. We've got another whole video on how to do that, masterclass suspension. But the other upside or downside actually, is you retain the factory coil. So if you want to keep that Nissan comfiness, like straight off the showroom floor, it'll be a lifted car, but ride as if it's like the way Nissan designed it, whether that's good or a bad thing. I actually like them to be like a little bit firmer, so I prefer the coil lifts. The downside is over time, like any coils, they start to sag or even collapse. Like this particular vehicle's a 2013 model, and it's sitting 30 mil lower on this side than the other side. And I think it's just because this coil has collapsed. Upsides, again, all the lift is underneath the shock, so that means you're going to get fantastic down travel, droop, I should say. Downside, you probably don't get quite as much tuck because it's not in the spring, it's all in the arm. We're going to talk about the different heights of lifts. Essentially, you're going to get a 50 mil lift out of this. There's two types. There's a light and a medium. If you've got just a no bar or a lightweight bar like a Predator bar, you'd get the light version of this. If you've got a heavier bar or a bar and winch, you'd go for the medium version of this. And it's just that bracket is a little bit taller, and that makes up for the extra weight that's on the car. Keep this in mind in a minute when we start talking about 4-inch lifts, because this is the starting point of a 4-inch lift, but we'll get to that last. All right, here we're looking at a coil lift. Notice the bracket at the bottom is in the standard height now, opposed to the lifted one I showed you earlier. To do this, we have to depressurize the whole HBMC system. Once we've done that, then we can pull the strut out of the vehicle, rebuild it on a bench with the new coils, put it back, repressurize it, and this will give you a firmer, only slightly firmer, it's not much at all, but a firmer suspension, which will raise the car. We'll talk about different heights in a moment, and I actually think it makes the car drive better. I do a lot of towing. I swear I can tow probably 15 k's an hour faster because it takes away all the pitching, because you've got a stronger coil at the front of the car. So then you've got Charlie's car, Tough 62, that has both. So it's got the lower control arm lift and the coil lift. So this has got the medium lower control arm lift engineered and the Tough Dog coil as well, giving us, well, we call it 4-inch lift, but it's probably about 85 millimeters. Now we could use some different coils to get it even higher again, like you can get it to 4 inches or even above that. However, then we start being worried about the drivetrain. We do have to diff drop it when we're going to this scale. Really anything above 40 millimeters, we have to diff drop the car just to get the CV angles correct again. But it's also the rubber boots that go around the CVs, like they start touching. And as soon as they start touching, it'll be premature wear, and you'll end up changing those rubber boots out every 10,000 k's. So, not that we do a lot of big lifts, but when we do, we try and keep it around that 85 millimeter mark. All right, we've got my car on the hoist now. This is what we call a 4-inch lift, almost a 4-inch lift. But I thought while we've got it up here, we'll talk about some of the bits you need to know. Coil selection is coming up soon. I'll get to that after this segment. But having a look at this car. So a bit of bling on this one. We've got the on-track billet arms at the bottom here. I've anodised them gold because that was the theme at the time. I even did anodised upper arms as well, if you can see that back there. What I want to also point out is the diff drop. This is another on-track product, and essentially when you're going to go above 40 mil, or let's say 50 mil and up, that's when you really need to be considering diff drops front and rear. Whilst we're here as well, just a quick tip here. I've noticed myself as looking at the car. These are your camber bolts. So there's a little notch here, and there's a little notch in the actual bolt through there as well. They need to line up. You can see this one, the notch is pointing that way, and this one's pointing straight down. That tells me this camber bolt is stuffed, and next time we do a wheel alignment, that's going to have to be changed before it gets seized. But yeah, at the back of the car, so the way you achieve your 4-inch lift is by coil and then K-frame spacer. And this is the sneaky way we get lift at the back. So obviously the coil, but then, so that's the chassis here. Down there's the K-frame, and that's a K-frame spacer. That one's a 40 mil. You can also get 22 mil, I think it is. The good and the bad of the K-frame spacer, it doesn't change CV angle, but it gives you like a body lift. However, as far as your shock absorber goes, it means you're not getting the full travel out of your shock. So if you take 40 mil K-frame spacers, you've got 40 mil less shock absorber stroke, and these cars do tend to struggle to dampen the rear end, and they never drive as good. In fact, if I'm talking about drivability of a Patrol, when you go over 50 mil, they get worse, both off-road and on-road. If you put K-frame spacers in, that can also happen. The 22 mil ones aren't too bad, and they can be a good band-aid fix if you've got a sinking back end and don't want to do a coil. But the car drives worse when you do a 4-inch lifts. You've got less down travel, so when you're off-road, it doesn't drive as well. You can make up for it by putting like a front locker in, but really the better lifts are the lower lifts. Like from my experience, there's probably about 2% more tracks that you can conquer with a 4-inch lift over, say, a 40 mil lift. And every other track, the 40 mil lift performs better off-road than all these big lifted cars. All right, we're at the front of the car now, and I'm having a look at the CV boot. So up here, this is your CV, and then there's a boot on the inner and outer, and a boot looks like this. So that's a boot, and it's designed to go like that. When these two edges touch each other, hopefully you can appreciate that, and they're rotating around like that, that's when they start to get premature wear. And you have a look at my car here, that's exactly what's happening. So you can see the shiny black, that means it's touching, and that's going to wear through. If we go to the other side, this one's probably even worse, and I can actually see when I pull that back, it's touching, and it's split the boot. So when you have it lifted too high, you're going to eat boots. What you can do, there's a bit of a trick. See this little clamp here? You can grab that and pull it down the shaft, which I haven't done on mine yet, I need to. And that will spread all these ribs out, and that will stop it from touching. But when you do the big lifts, you kind of need to do that. On the front, we generally don't use the Nissan Genuines, we use an aftermarket one. That's the code if you really want to see it. But it's not a bad idea if you're traveling to take a spare one of these with you. I think they're, I don't know, $45 or something. But that could go in the kit with all the other, traveling, if you're going to do Simpson Desert or something like that. I'd put one of them or two in. On my last car that had the 4-inch lift, I reckon it might have been a tad over 4 inches, because what happened is it stretched where the fuel tank is. So there's a breather between the gravity-fed 40 litre and the 100 litre main. So this is your 40 litre gravity-fed tank that goes down to the main. This is the main on this side. All right, so that's the breather, that I think it's 22 mil or something like that rubber hose. There's two of them, and on some cars we need to extend that because they pinch. And I had that line come off when I was in Vic High Country, and every time I went up a hill, it poured fuel out the back, and I needed range, so I only had the 100 litre here, and also the 120 litre LRA in it as well. So that's the camber bolt. That's the notch that I was telling you about, so that can slide up and down. So when you see the notch there and the notch there not lining up, something's going wrong, like it's busted in there. something else I'd put in my emergency parts list is a couple of them too. All right, before we flip over to the coil selection, I want to talk a bit more about what happens when you lift a car over 40 mil, or 50 mil I should say. Instead of myself going through it, it would have been a year ago or more that we put on Facebook. Steve did this fantastic explanation, so we're going to chop to that, and you understand why diff drops are so important for towing and caravans.
What's going on, Steve-O? Morning. Going to tell you a little bit about our drive shaft issues that we've been seeing. So pulling these things apart after we have a 50 mil lift, people say that they wear the boots out. Obviously once you start lifting a drive shaft, those little ribs there do touch, so they can wear a line in them, which then splits them open. So this one here is getting that for that simple reason. We're going to be putting new boots on this one to stop the sand and moisture and bits and pieces getting into it. But what we found, which is more critical for everyone, is the rear drive shaft. We're getting people ringing up saying that they're shattering drive shafts. We can't work out what's going on. We're doing everything we possibly can, but I reckon, pinned it. So this particular one had a 50 mil lift, and you can see here, Dave, we got a little indentation mark. So that indentation mark there is where they drive standard, and that's where the ball bearing inside runs, which is in a nice strength section of that. But then when we lift them, that drive shaft is going from that angle to 50 mil lower, which is changing the position, which is giving it that next step, which is right on the lip, and that's putting, obviously a lot more pressure on that one area. But then what's happening is, as you can turn, that's happening. So when this happens, because it's going over the step as the drive shaft's moving, your suspension's going up and down, it's starting to roll over it, and then it starts to mash it, and then the clicks appear, and then it gets to the point where people are coming in with these totally shattered. I have to replace them. Even so, the boots have looked good on some of them. As you take off, you start to hear the click, the grind, and that's the ball bearings getting pinched in this area. So when...
What's the fix?
So when we, just another thing too, like when you set a 50 mil lift, your shaft is sitting there like that. But when you're towing your caravan, you're going over those undulations in the road, it's doing these ones, but then it will start to get real high lift, which pushes it to its full limit. So that's another call we're getting, is when you're towing, people are destroying drive shafts. But I reckon what we need to do to fix this issue is to put a diff drop.
Yeah.
Every 50 mil lift we do, we just drop the diff down.
Yeah, fair enough.
Have to get that angle right.
All right, coil selection. First of all, we're going to tell you about our calculator. We've done a whole video on how to use the calculator. You can go and see that over there. But if you go to the Dash Off-Road website, there's a little tab called Guides and then Suspension Calculator. And if your installer doesn't have the HPMC machine, you can put in all your car's details and it will punch out a recipe that you can order and take to your installer, and it will work out at a perfect 50 mil lift. Don't forget to add your diff drops. If you want to go for a coil, so your favourite installer, hopefully 4x4 DNA, has the HPMC machine for installing or depressurising the system. Let's go through that, because there's 5 coils that we think will fit 90% of lifts that we're going to do. And I'm going to talk a lot about the Samurai, a little bit about Old Man Emu and Dobinson's. Note though, the Samurai coils, like we do probably about 100 GVM upgrades a year, and probably another 100 coil lifts a year. Every single car that comes in, we measure the heights before and after, and we've got a pretty good idea of what happens to them. So there's a lot of experience that's gone into developing these Samurai coils, hence the premium price for them too. But now I can eyeball, or Steve, if we get a car, drive into the car park, we can eyeball it and in a split second tell you what coil's going to need to go into that car to get the desired lift. So, all right, let's get into it. This is a Samurai coil. You know what it is because it's red and it's got the Dash Off-Road written here and a code. Now, to make that easy for you to understand, it'll say SAM as the code. The next letter will be like F or R, so front or rear, and then it's easy. It'll be either LW, lightweight, medium weight, heavyweight. So there's 3 rears, and on the front there'll be either lightweight or heavyweight. So when we use these coils, we know exactly what's going to happen with them because we've done them so many times before. If you have, say, no bar, you're going to get a 40 mil lift with a lightweight coil. If you have a bar and or winch, probably go straight to the heavyweight one. So if it's a bar only, you'll get that 40 mil. If it's a bar and a winch, you'll get a 35 mil on the front. And we know that that is that magical sort of height that we don't actually have to put upper control arms into to improve our camber and caster. So it's a cost-effective way to do it too. If you're getting a GVM upgrade, the upper control arm at the front is a part of the recipe, so you have to do it. But if you stay under that 40 mil, you save yourself another $900 for the upper control arms and probably another 3 hours to fit them. So it's that extra 10 mil, if you want to go to 50 mil, gets quite expensive. Hence why we do mostly 40 mil and under. Now at the back, you've got 3 coils. So if you've got no weight in it at all, like absolutely nothing, or even you've taken the seats out, you just want to go for the lightweight, so the SAM, rear, R, LW, and you're going to get probably about 45 mil lift at the back because we like to have them ever so slightly raked. If you've got the seats out, the third row seats out, it might be 50 mil at the back, and that's where we just have to not go any further. If you measure from the center of the wheel to the guard, that's called an eyebrow height, and for better or worse, it's about 530 all the way around standard. Front's actually slightly more. But so when you're going to go measure the back, you want to keep it at 580 or less, and then you can actually get full adjustment without putting camber correction bushes in. Ideally, camber correction bushes would never be used because they're a way to offset the wheel to make it move out, and the aftermarket ones, as good as they are, tend to squeak. I believe there are some new ones coming out which are rubber in the future which might fix that, but we only put camber correction bushes in when we have to, and that's if we're basically at that 580 mark or over. Otherwise you won't get wheel alignment, scrub tyres, all that sort of thing. Now, if you've got weight in the back, now when the car rolls into us, we assess it for how it's sitting when it comes into us. So if you're going to go put a rear bar on later, like we can't put a coil in and wheel align it for a rear bar later. It has to be how the car presents to us now. When you want to get a rear bar or a long range tank later on, you move up to the next bracket of coil. So you go to the medium weight. So that will be SAM for Samurai, rear, MW, medium weight. If you want both, a long range tank and a rear bar, then you go to all of that, but the heavyweights will be HW at the end. And all of those will give you that sort of 45, maybe 50 mil lift at the back. You've just got to add it up, like how much weight's on the car. If you've got drawers and all of that stuff going in, try and have the weight in the car before it comes to us. If you say, oh, I'm getting them in 3 months' time, look how heavy the drawers. Most of them are 100 plus kilos, and then you put another 100 kilos in them, you might be going up to that next coil level straight away. There are some other coils on the market which are sort of that next level again. I'm a big fan of the Old Man Emu 2988s, which I run in my car at the moment, because I've got rear drawers and a rear bar. If you end up having even more weight again, say you've got rear bar, long range tank, drawers full of stuff, people, towable weight, the whole bit, there's another coil called an Atico 5055, and that's basically the biggest coil we can get. That's the last resort. We only put it in when we have to, but if you have a car that has the whole shebang, that's the coil we put in. And when I give you these heights and measurements and all that sort of thing, I'll tell you one more bit. Every coil sags after a while. So whatever you come in now, sitting at a 45 mil lift, in 12 months' time, it'll probably only be a 40 mil lift because that's just what happens. So we're happy them leaving on day one at sort of 45, 50, but we know it's going to sag in time. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Q&A session on suspension. So we're not going to talk much about wheel alignment at the moment or GVM, GCM upgrades because that's in the future videos. But we're going to go about suspension. Tony Mattison, what do you do if you want to put a bull bar weighing less than 75 kilo net but don't want or need to lift it? The fact that it's got 75 kilo net tells me that the actual bar is probably more like, 80 or 90 kilos because you take a bunch of stuff off to put the bar on. But if you're putting a 90 kilo bar on a Y62, that's going to be like one of those Ironman raid bars or something with like you want to run over camels in the desert with. I'd question whether that's the right bar to go on a Y62. If you want something that's going to be a zombie basher, you should probably look for a different car. But in saying that, we could probably fudge something to make it work.
Yeah, we can definitely muck around, and we got some springs that we put with lifts without bars. That spring there might be something that we can take a bit of a gamble. But you're going to have to sort of muck around with the rear spring too, because the rear spring is designed for the soccer mum car that's heights of 530, and you're going to have to give like a toe call to sort of match it. So your lift that you're not wanting to achieve, you're going to have to get it back up because you're going to drop 20. You got to get it back to 20, maybe 10 more. So a 30, if it supports and gives you a 10 mil lift, perfect.
You can't ignore the weight that far away from the front axle. It's going to drive different.
Anything you put on these things, we know. Anything you do to these cars, you've got to support it with the right spring rate.
Gerard Lamy, HPMC pressure, does it have to be adjusted?
Yeah, well, when we service the vehicles, we make sure that the desired pressure is the same as what needs to set. So the accumulators in the actual HPMC are set at that pressure to work at their maximum performance. So lifting the car or lowering the car, the pressure is not going to make any difference. We've tested it before. We've actually tried it just to see if it would ride harder, give a firm bump, hold those back wheels on the ground, but it doesn't. It doesn't do anything apart from puts all the strain on the HPMC unit that's not desired for that desired pressure.
I guess if you were really particular and you set a pressure here in Adelaide and then drove it to Cape York and measured the exact same pressure, because of the latitude of the Earth, you might get a slightly different reading. But I don't know if you'd bother adjusting it. We've mucked around here and lowered it and raised it, and when it's lower, it might be a little bit better off road. When it's higher, it may be a little bit better on road, but it's not that.
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I've had some that have come in that have accidentally let and released the pressure, and they've got us to fix it. And I've gone for a road test with you.
Yeah.
And it dips when you brake hard,
bumpy.
but it's not massive difference.
Mark Watson, looking to do a 40mm maximum coil lift. What else is needed to be done to suit this height of lift? Do we have to do anything else besides coils?
35 to 40mm lift is your maximum height to be able to keep your drive shafts at the right angle and make sure you don't have the drive shafts that bind together, the rubber, and the angle of the drive shafts on the rear end is going to be fine.
I think so too. So we don't necessarily need to do upper control arms, and you might even get away with not having to do camber bushes.
So if you were to do upper control arms on a lift that's only a 35 to 40mm lift, it'll be able to let you achieve 5 degrees of caster, which is massive. You don't need to push the wheels forward that far.
Yeah. I guess if you want a really heavy steering wheel, maybe, or you want to sit on the road at 160 k's an hour.
No.
Ian Kirk, what lift height works best for the Y62, such as 40mm or 50mm lift and why? I'll put a fair bit into the video about this, but I'll get your opinion too.
That's okay. Look, I'm going to be... all right, there's two ways of explaining this. 35 to 40mm lift is something that we desire. We've pushed because we know that we don't have to spend extra money on front and rear diff drops, articulation and tuck. You get more travel up and down, and the wheels stay on the ground longer. But 50mm lift, mate, awesome fun. The off-road, you get the best pictures because you get wheels that lift sky high, yeah.
Bendelby Ranges going up around that Billy Goat Bluff track, and there's a real tight turn halfway up. All the 50mm lifts lifted a wheel and got an awesome photo.
Yep.
All the ones with lower lifts, they just didn't leave the ground.
Just walked over it and went, oh, that made me look bad.
Yeah, they articulated. which is photos 50mm lift.
Absolutely.
And for YouTubers, and for you want to keep your feet on the ground, 40's fine. All right, these are the ones, the airbag ones we covered the other day. John McFarlane, best lift purely for off-road use to utilise suspension travel. We kind of just talked about that.
Yeah, we just said that. So, you can achieve the same sort of drive style with a 50mm lift. It's just a matter of picking your lines better. But you're also getting belly clearance because you are physically higher. We don't have the dramas with our independent suspension of diffing out as much. I mean, if you're really heavy off-road, it's a totally different. But Dave and I, we sort of mid-fall driver, go out there and do some pretty crazy things, but we clear things most of the time, don't we?
Always. All right, I think Instagram 4-inch lift is the go, but everything else lower. Matty Hogan, I've already got my quote from Ollie, thank you. But if I go a 2-inch lift, what's the biggest size with K-frame spaces? Actually, I've sort of been talking about that. It's saying, if you just go like the 22mm or the 40mm K-frame spaces. If you want the Insta photo, which Matty, I know you do, go the whole hog, mate.
Look, you can go the whole hog, but you've got to make sure that it looks like we're fitting the stuff here.
That's in Melbourne, that one.
It's in Melbourne. So we just got to make sure that we don't forget about the other alternatives, like the other things that are mounted to underneath the K-frame, so handbrake cables, okay? A 50mm diff drop makes the handbrake cables get so close to the spindles on the diff, it can cause them to just touch the ground, the handbrake cable catches that star spindle and it literally will pick it up and wrap it around 50 million times and pull it straight out of your floor. So there's things that you need to take in consideration by doing the 40mm K-frame spaces.
I've done that. Ilias, you'll be watching, you've done that as well, and it makes a huge racket in the car when it goes. It's like boom, boom. Matt Jones, as someone with a standard Y62, when towing my camper trailer, it obviously sinks in the rear when towing. Can I get away with a stiffer spring without investing large dollars into a lift kit? I think we touched on this last week.
Oh, look, at the end of the day, there is alternatives out there, but it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If a customer comes in to me and says, I want to tow, but I don't want to lift, my wife can't get in the car, I don't want to spend the money, but then you got to consider, all right, well, what tow ball weight you got? I've got 300. Yeah. Well, sorry, mate, you can't do it with a king spring, you can't do it with a dash, tow call. You sort of got to set your limits, all right? I've got 150 to maximum 200 kilo down ball weight. You know what? We'll give it a go, but we'll see what it's like in 6 months' time.
Yeah. All right, getting towards the end here. I swear you're answering the question, and then the next question comes up. Yeah. For an empty rear, standard, but when towing a big van, 250, 300 kilos ball weight, what coil airbag combo is best? So far, maybe I'll take this one. We make a call, like we're going to have to lift the car. That's step number one, even if it's a small lift, 30, 40mm. The threshold to change our decision on what coil we're going to use is whether the tow ball weight is 300 kilos or more. So if it's under 300 kilos, we know we can manage that with any of our Samurai coils and an airbag, whether it be jumbo or interlocks. As soon as you go over 300 kilos, that's when, with these Y62s, it means your van's probably over 3 tonne, and I don't know if it's the best car for doing that sort of thing. So to achieve that, you have to overspring the car. So that means instead of like targeting maybe a 5 or 10mm rake at the back, you've got to go for a bit more to make it oversprung. And then we run into the wheel alignment issues. Really, if someone says they've got 350 kilos on the ball, my next question is, how often do you tow? Is it like once a year, twice a year, or are you a full-time traveller? If you're a full-time traveller, I'm going straight to that a Tico coil and overspringing the vehicle. Whatever we were going to do, we'll do one step up, overspring it, because we know that the van's going to spend most of its time on the car, and it will achieve wheel alignment when it comes down, but for the rest of the time it's going to be, right on the edge of wheel alignment.
So we've done one. which was a very similar instance to this question. So he came in, he didn't want any bar work, but he wanted us to have heavier springs in the rear, and he was destined, wanted to go that next level up. So the 0 to 120 spring that we would normally put into a vehicle at stock standard, no weight in it, this is a 35 to 40 mil lift, obviously. We decided with this gentleman, because he was going to put a caravan on and he's going to spend 6 to 12 months on the road with his caravan, I thought, you know what, this one, let's be safe. We put the next step up, which was 120 to 300 kilo rear springs, and I got him to do the diff drop.
I see.
So we said to him, look, at the end of the day, achieving wheel alignment when the car's raked too high, because as soon as you go 30, 40 mil higher in the rear than you do the front, you can't achieve caster. So we did everything. So we did upper control arms to push the wheels forward to get caster. We did the lights in the front to get his 35 to 40 mil lift, but we put a 60 to 70 mil lift in the rear with a diff drop and airbags. So this gentleman has the best opportunity to be able to hook up his 300 kilo ball weight. It was even more than that. I think it was like 320 or 350.
It was huge.
So he's hooked up, he's driven, and as soon as he gets to his destination after the first long, decent haul, his car would have come down and sat down at those levels where he could have got that second wheel alignment and probably got it spot on. But you can't physically do this all the time if no one's going to do that. Otherwise it will just throw tyres and be wrong. It'll look awesome going down the road with the bum sticking up in the air.
There's a lot of questions.
That was sarcasm.
Are kind of the same. These are GVM ones. So we're going to do, the next episode will be on GVM and GCM upgrades. And I think we might even do another one on wheel alignment, to be honest. So, because that's a lot of questions. They all come back to the wheel alignment right at the end. All right, legal heights check with your local road authority. Here's one about coil spacers. I've never been a big fan of these things. Like, this is for the front. What are your opinions?
Okay, so we've had other people that have reported back to us after fitting them and said that, you know, like a 5 mil spacer will give you 15 mil lift. But it also takes the pressure away from the studs. So the studs on the top hat, on the front struts, are minimised, so you can only grip onto the nut size of the stud sticking out. So there's a little bit of a flaw that I sort of pick up on long term. The short term might be all right, but it may be something that goes wrong later. Look, they've been doing it for years. That's how they lifted most of these cars prior. They used to put those blocks underneath your Hiluxes and Isuzis and all that, and then they just put the different leaf spring on the rear. So yeah, I mean, it's exactly the same idea as what we're doing with the K-frame.
That's great.
So we personally don't do it here because we've got a lot of vehicles that go back through Regency and go through the GVM and they have the correct parts that we fit. But if you were going to have something that was modified and you wanted just that little bit more.
And I don't want a phone call from someone in the middle of the bush somewhere going, oh, this has happened. I've put spacers, or we put spacers in it. And like, it's not the right way to do it, if you ask me.
And they're 2 half spacers. So putting the 2 half spacers in there, if one did crack or it dislodged, it'll be, I mean, that's your chassis you're playing with, yeah?
Do that in the garage at home, but we're not doing it. All right. I've got a Warrior. After watching last week's episode, need to upgrade the airbags, but what coil would you match to the front of a Warrior?
So we've taken a 0 to 120 spring of our selection and put it in.
So that'll be the Samurai SAM R LW, it's called. That's the code.
Rear lightweight.
Yeah. I'm getting around them.
So the rear lightweight 0 to 120 spring will suit this to the T.
Kind of matches up with the colouring a bit too of the Warrior coil. I don't mind it.
Well, not only that, you can put a bag in it without it protruding.
It does rake it ever so slightly, so I reckon the Warrior is designed for, 30 mil lift, and I think this takes it up to 40.
Yeah, but it'll settle.
Yeah, it will. Yeah.
And when I say settle, people get confused whether it's the spring that settles, but it's actually the spring itself really doesn't settle. It seats into the rubber at the top and at the bottom, and that's what can give you drops down a little bit after a little bit of driving.
All right, I think that's this week's Q&A is done. So next week, next week we're on holiday. So it might be a little pause between the next episode. I'm going to do GVM, GCM upgrades. That's my cheat notes over there. And we'll be asking, just before we publish that video, we'll ask for more questions about it, because I reckon there'll be a stack on GVM and especially GCM. And that seems to be something that changes every 5 minutes. All right, thank you for watching. Thanks, Steve.
Do we even know the answers?
By then I will.
No worries,
We're
mate.
out.
See you later.
Yeah.